The frontier was a place of whispers, where every rumor traveled faster than the wind, and in one small town, nestled at the foot of a mountain range, there was one name spoken only in hushed voices. The name of the mountain man. To some, he was a monster. To others, he was a beast who had taken lives. Mothers warned their children never to wander near the cage at the far edge of town, where the man was kept under heavy locks, like some kind of wild animal. Shackles on his wrists, a beard grown thick and untamed, and eyes that burned with an anger no one dared to face. The townsfolk didn't remember his story. They only remembered their fear. All they knew was that he had once lived high in the mountains away from men, until one violent night changed everything. And ever since he had been dragged down and caged, not trusted to walk freely among them. But that same week, as spring began to touch the land, a stagecoach rolled into town. And inside was a young woman, her dress worn from travel, her eyes tired yet filled with hope. She was a mail-order bride, promised to a farmer who had written her letters for months. To her, he was supposed to be her future, her chance at a home, a family, and stability she had never known. But fate is often cruel. When she arrived, she discovered the man she had come to marry had died only weeks before. There was no husband waiting for her, no home prepared. The people of the town looked at her with pity, but not a single soul offered her shelter. She was a stranger, unwanted, with nowhere to go. For a woman alone, the frontier was a dangerous place. With no family, no money, and no husband to protect her, she would be swallowed by hardship or worse. But she was not weak. She was desperate, and desperation makes a person bold. That evening, as the sun began to fall behind the mountain ridge, the young bride found herself walking down a dirt path few dared to tread. It led to the outskirts of town, to the heavy wooden cage where the feared man sat in silence. The people had told her his story. They had laughed at the very idea that anyone would approach him. Some called her foolish, others whispered that grief had made her mad. But she pressed on, her hands trembling as she clutched her dress, her heart racing louder with every step. And then, there he was, the mountain man. Chains wrapped around his arms, his frame massive even in stillness, his face shadowed by tangled hair. He did not move as she came closer. Only his eyes lifted, piercing through the bars, staring straight into hers. For a long moment, no words passed between them. The town had feared him, caged him, and forgotten him. Yet here stood a woman, fragile, uncertain, but unshaken. And then her lips parted. With a voice soft but unwavering, she spoke the words that silenced even the restless birds in the trees. "Please, marry me." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "Please, marry me." The mountain man didn't answer. His chained hands tightened slightly against the iron bars, and the sound of rattling metal echoed through the silence. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with something else, something unreadable. The young bride's heart pounded so loud, she thought he might hear it. She had rehearsed these words in her mind the entire walk from town, yet saying them aloud made her feel foolish, almost broken. What woman in her right mind would beg a caged man, feared by all, to be her husband? Behind, her whispers stirred. A few townsfolk had followed at a distance, curious to see if the rumors were true. They snickered, pointing fingers at the woman who stood with dignity before the beast. "She's mad," one muttered. "Desperate," another sneered. "No better than him," a third spat. But she ignored them. Her eyes stayed fixed on his. At last the mountain man leaned forward. His voice, low and gravelly, broke the silence. "You don't know what you're asking." The bride's lips trembled, but she stood her ground. "I know enough. You're a man. I need a husband. That's all there is to it." He let out a bitter laugh, a sound that was half pain, half disbelief. "A husband? Me? Girl, they've locked me in this cage for years. They call me an animal, a murderer." Her gaze softened. "And yet, you haven't harmed me." His jaw clenched. "Not yet." For a moment, their eyes locked. Hers, full of quiet determination. His, hardened by years of chains and betrayal. Somewhere in that silence, something shifted. He saw not fear in her face, but courage. Still, he shook his head. "Go back. Find another man. Someone free, someone whole. I can give you nothing." Her voice cracked, though her resolve did not. "There is no one else. The man I came here to marry is dead. I have no home, no kin, no coin. The town has made it clear I am not welcome. If I stay here alone, I'll be swallowed alive by this land." Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "But you're strong, and I would rather chain myself to a man in iron than waste away unseen." The mountain man studied her long and hard. For years, he had been treated as less than human, a creature to be feared and mocked. Yet this woman, she looked at him not as a beast, but as a man. Behind them, the crowd grew louder. "Go on, monster," one man jeered. "Take her. Let's see how long she lasts." Laughter erupted, cruel and sharp. The bride turned, her cheeks flushed with humiliation, and for the first time her voice rose. "At least I have the courage to stand here. Better to risk love with a caged man than rot in silence." The townsfolk fell quiet, surprised at her outburst. The mountain man's eyes flickered, something unreadable stirring in his chest. The sheriff, who had kept his distance, stepped forward. "Ma'am, this man ain't fit for marriage. You don't know what he's capable of. He's dangerous." The bride faced him firmly. "And yet you keep him caged because you're afraid to set him free. Perhaps it isn't he who is dangerous, but your fear of him." The sheriff bristled, unable to reply. The mountain man leaned back, his chains clinking. For the first time in years, a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "You've got fire," he said quietly. Her chest rose and fell with nervous breaths. "Then marry me, not for love, not yet, for survival. For a chance to prove to them all they were wrong about you." The crowd murmured, shocked at her boldness. Some shook their heads, others whispered bets about how quickly she would regret it. The mountain man, studied her once more. Then his deep voice rumbled, steady as stone. "If you want me for your husband, you'll have to fight for it against them." He tilted his head toward the watching townsfolk. "They'll never allow it. You'd be hated, mocked, cast aside." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then let them. I've been cast aside my whole life. One more time won't break me." For a moment silence reigned. Then the mountain man let out a low breath, almost like surrender. "Very well, girl. If it's marriage you want." His eyes darkened, heavy with warning. "Just know, once, I give my word I keep it, and once you wear my name, you'll never be rid of me." The bride's hands trembled at her sides, but her voice held steady. "That's exactly what I want." And with those words, the impossible began to take root. A union between a desperate bride and a feared prisoner. A bond that would soon shake the very foundations of the town that mocked them both. The town was buzzing for days after the woman's shocking proposal. A mail-order bride, standing before the cage of the most feared man in the valley, asking for his hand in marriage. It was madness to them. But to her, it was survival. The sheriff tried to dismiss the entire idea, calling it nonsense, but gossip spreads like wildfire in small towns. By the next morning, every man, woman, and child had an opinion. Some laughed, others whispered she had gone insane, and a few spat in disgust whenever she passed. But none offered her a kind word. Yet the bride did not falter. Each day she returned to the cage. She would bring bread or a jug of water or a small tin cup of soup. At first, the mountain man said nothing, staring at her in silence, as though waiting for her to give up like everyone else. But she didn't. On the third day, as she pushed a loaf of bread through the bars, his voice rumbled low. "Why do you keep coming back?" She hesitated, meeting his eyes. "Because you're the only one who hasn't turned me away." His gaze lingered on her, sharp and probing. "Don't mistake my silence for kindness." She lifted her chin. "And don't mistake my persistence for weakness." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not hardness, but the faint shadow of respect. That evening, as she sat across from the cage, the townsfolk gathered at a distance, mocking her. One tossed a stone that clattered near her feet. Another shouted, Kiss the beast if you love him so much." The crowd erupted in laughter. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't rise. Instead, she turned back to the man in the cage and asked, softly, "Do their words ever stop cutting?" His jaw tightened. "They stopped cutting me a long time ago. And yet," she said, her voice careful, "I can still see the scars." The mountain man went silent. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. On the 5th day, he surprised her. As she sat by the bars, he asked, "What's your name?" Her eyes widened. He hadn't cared enough to ask until now. "Clara," she said quietly. "Clara Bennett." He nodded slowly. "Samuel," he muttered. "Samuel Kane." The name struck her. It was the first piece of humanity the town had stripped away from him. They had called him beast, monster, wild man, but never Samuel. From that day forward, Clara made it her mission to use his name whenever she spoke. And each time she did, his hardened eyes seemed to soften, if only for a moment. Days turned into weeks, and a strange bond began to form. She asked him questions about the mountains, about his life before the cage. Sometimes he answered with short, gruff replies. Sometimes he only stared into the distance, silent and brooding. But little by little, he revealed fragments of his story. He had lived in the high country, away from men because men had wronged him. He had been accused of a crime he did not commit, and rather than let him walk free, the town had locked him up, branding him a danger. No trial, no chance at defense, only chains. Clara listened, and her heart ached. She could see the truth in his eyes, the bitterness of injustice. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she placed her hand against the cold iron bars. "If you were free," she whispered, "what would you do?" He stared at her hand for a long time before answering. "I'd disappear into the mountains. Never look back." Her throat tightened. "And if I asked you not to?" His gaze rose to hers, steady and piercing. For the first time, he didn't answer quickly. The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. Finally, he said, "Then I'd have to ask why." She smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "Because I'm tired of being alone, and I think you are too." The chains rattled as Samuel leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "Careful, Clara. You're asking to bind yourself to a man the world already hates." Her hand did not waver against the bars. "Then let them hate me too." For a moment, his breath caught. He had expected her to flinch, to retreat, to run as everyone else had, but she stayed. And in that stillness, something unfamiliar stirred within him, something dangerous, not because it was violent, but because it was tender. The townsfolk continued their jeers. The sheriff threatened to put an end to her nonsense. But Clara ignored them all. She kept returning day after day, feeding Samuel not only bread and soup, but words that reminded him he was a man, not a beast. And though he never said it aloud, each time she spoke his name, each time she looked at him without fear, Samuel felt the rusted chains around his heart loosen, one link at a time. What neither of them knew was that the town's patience was wearing thin. Their bond, fragile but growing, was becoming a threat. And soon Clara's defiance would force the people of the town to make a choice: cage her with him, or let the beast go free. By the 3rd week, Clara's presence at the cage was no longer a curiosity. It was a scandal. The townsfolk had grown, restless, their whispers sharper, their laughter crueler. What had once been a source of entertainment now became an offense. A respectable woman, though a stranger, sitting every evening with the caged beast was something they could not accept. 1. Afternoon, as Clara carried a basket of bread down the dirt path, a group of women intercepted her, their faces twisted with contempt. "You shame us all," one spat, stepping into Clara's path. "Throwing yourself at a murderer. What kind of bride are you?" sneered another. A third woman shook her head, her voice dripping with venom. "If you stay here, no man in this town will claim you. You'll be worse than widowed. You'll be ruined." Clara's hands tightened around the basket. Her cheeks flushed, but her eyes did not drop. "If being ruined means showing kindness to a man you've all condemned without trial, then so be it." Gasps rose among the women. their indignation sharp as knives. One of them snatched the basket from her hands and flung the bread into the dust. Clara's breath caught, but she refused to bend down and scramble for the ruined loaves. Instead, she walked past them with her back straight, leaving whispers of fool and madwoman in her wake. When she reached the cage that evening, Samuel was waiting. He had seen the commotion from a distance, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "You shouldn't have come today," he said gruffly as she knelt near the bars. "And why not?" she asked, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Because they'll turn on you. The more you come here, the more you're marked. They'll never forgive you for standing by me." She tilted her head, meeting his gaze. "Then let them hate me. I've lived through worse." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. They'll break you, just like they broke me." Clara's voice was quiet but steady. "The only way they can break me is if I let go of hope. And you, Samuel, you are the only hope I have left." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he leaned back against the bars, staring at the sky. "You're a stubborn fool of a woman," she smiled faintly. "So I've been told." But Samuel wasn't smiling. Inside, a storm churned. For years he had believed himself cursed, unworthy of kindness, unworthy of love. And now this woman, fragile, foolish, and fearless, was undoing all the walls he had built around his heart. The next morning, the sheriff himself came to see Clara. He found her at the general store, carefully counting the few coins she had. "Left, Miss Bennet," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "This needs to stop. Whatever game you're playing, it's over." She looked up, her brow furrowed. "This isn't a game," he exhaled, adjusting his hat. "That man is dangerous. He killed once. He'll kill again. You think you see something worth saving. But all you're doing is painting a target on your back." Her voice hardened. "And I suppose the town gave him a fair chance to prove himself?" The sheriff's silence was answer enough. "You locked him away because it was easier than facing the truth," she continued. "And now you want to lock me away too, because I remind you of your cowardice." The sheriff's jaw clenched, his patience thinning. "I'm warning you, Miss Bennet, keep away from that cage or you'll regret it." But Clara didn't waver. She turned her back to him and left without another word. That night, as she sat by the cage, Samuel spoke, softly. "They'll drive you out, Clara, or worse. I don't want that blood on my hands." Her brows knit. "You think you're poison, Samuel, but you're not. The only poison in this town is fear." He gripped the bars, his knuckles white. "Fear keeps people alive, and love keeps people human," she replied. The words struck him harder than he wanted to admit. He turned his face away, struggling against the war inside him. The need to push her away to keep her safe, and the desperate, dangerous desire to keep her close. "At last," he whispered, almost too low for her to hear. "You should let me go, Clara. You'll only drown with me." But she shook her head, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Then I'll drown willingly, because I'd rather sink beside you than live alone on the shore." Samuel's chest tightened painfully. He wanted to roar, to rage, to shake the bars until they broke. Instead, he fell silent because deep inside he knew the truth. He could resist the sheriff, the town, even the chains around his wrists. But he could not resist her. And that terrified him more than any prison. The storm came without warning. All day, the skies had been restless, grey clouds twisting over the mountains, the wind howling through the narrow streets of the town. By nightfall, the heavens opened with a fury, and rain lashed against the earth like whips. Clara fought against the storm, clutching her shawl tight as she ran toward the edge of town. Most families had locked their doors and barred their windows, but she thought only of Samuel, chained, helpless, trapped in the cage. As the wind threatened to tear it from the ground, lightning split the sky, illuminating the figure of the mountain man as she stumbled into the clearing. His chains rattled violently, his massive frame braced against the bars. The storm roared around him, but his eyes locked on hers, fierce and unyielding. "Go back," he bellowed over the thunder. "You'll be killed out here." She pushed forward, rain soaking her hair, her skirts dragging heavy with mud. "And leave you to die like an animal? Never!" The cage groaned under the force of the storm. A great tree swayed dangerously nearby, its roots half torn from the earth. With every gust it leaned closer, threatening to crush the wooden structure that held Samuel prisoner. Samuel yanked at his chains, his muscles straining, but the iron held firm. For years, he had endured this cage. Tonight, it would become his grave, unless... Clara reached the lock at the front of the cage, fumbling with trembling hands. She had stolen a key from the sheriff's office days earlier, a desperate act she had never intended to use. Until now, her hands shook violently as she pressed the cold metal into the lock. "Hold still," she cried. Samuel's eyes widened. "Clara, don't. If you set me free, they'll never forgive you. They'll come for you first." The key slipped once, twice, before finally catching. The lock clicked open. She pushed hard against the door, the rusted hinges screeching as it swung wide. The moment his chains rattled free, Samuel surged forward, seizing her arm before the wind could drag her down. The storm howled around them, the great tree splitting with a deafening crack as it came crashing toward the cage. They leapt clear, just as the trunk slammed into the wooden frame, shattering it to splinters. The cage that had held him for years lay crushed beneath the weight of the fallen oak. Samuel's chest heaved as he stared at the wreckage, his prison destroyed in an instant. For the first time in years, he stood in the open, the rain drenching his face, his body unchained. Clara's voice trembled. "You're free now, Samuel. Go, run to the mountains before they come." But Samuel didn't move. His gaze was fixed, on her, fierce and unrelenting. "You did this for me. Now they'll call you worse than a fool. They'll call you my accomplice." She swallowed hard, her teeth chattering in the cold. "Then let them. I couldn't watch you die." For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm raged, thunder rolling over the valley. Samuel took a step closer, towering over her, his eyes burning with something more dangerous than fury, something far more human. "You're a mad woman," he muttered. "But you've given me back my life." Before she could answer, a shout carried through the storm. Lanterns bobbed in the distance, the townsfolk, armed and furious, racing toward the clearing. Clara's breath caught. "They're coming!" Samuel grabbed her hand, his grip like iron. "Then you come with me, now." She hesitated, her eyes wide. "Into the mountains?" His jaw set firm. "It's the only place they won't follow. You've broken my chains, Clara. There's no going back for either of us." The lantern light drew closer, voices rising in anger and fear. Clara looked once over her shoulder, then back into Samuel's eyes. She saw no monster there, only a man who had been caged too long and who was now ready to fight for freedom. With a trembling nod, she tightened her grip on his hand, then lead the way. Together they disappeared into the storm, leaving the shattered cage behind and the furious shouts of the town swallowed by the thunder. For the first time, Samuel Kane was free. But freedom came at a price, and by choosing it, Clara had bound her fate to his forever. The storm did not ease until dawn. By then, Clara could barely stand, her skirts torn and soaked, her hands raw from scrambling over rocks. Samuel led her higher into the mountains, his strength unshaken despite the night's ordeal. At last he guided her beneath a jagged cliffside, where a shallow cave yawned dark and dry. "We'll rest here," he said, his voice low and rough. But steady. Clara collapsed onto the stone floor, chest heaving. Her hair clung to her face in damp curls, and mud streaked her cheeks, but her eyes glimmered with stubborn fire. Samuel crouched near the entrance, scanning the valley below. Lantern lights flickered faintly in the distance, the town's search parties still scouring the storm-torn land. He muttered under his breath, "They'll hunt me like a dog." Clara's voice was hoarse, but unyielding. "Then let them. Dogs don't find wolves in their own mountains." He turned to her, startled. For a moment, his hard features softened into something almost like amusement. "You've got a tongue sharp enough to cut steel, woman." She gave a faint, weary smile. "And you've got a heart tough enough to survive a cage." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of dripping water from the cave walls. Samuel finally pulled off his heavy, sodden coat and laid it around her shoulders. "You'll freeze," she protested. He shook his head. "I've slept in snow before. You'd last an hour without it." The gesture stole her breath. For all his gruffness, there was gentleness in the way he tucked the coat around her, as if afraid she might shatter. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the mountains washed clean, Samuel set out with a hunter's efficiency, returning with dry branches and a spark struck from stone. Soon a small fire glowed in the cave, its warmth easing Clara's shivers. He handed her a strip of dried venison from his pack, supplies. He had hidden long ago in case freedom ever came. As she ate, her eyes lingered on him. Without the bars of the cage, Samuel looked different, still massive, still scarred, but not monstrous. His eyes, clear and piercing, held more sorrow than savagery. At last, she asked the question that had burned in her since the first day she saw him. Why did they lock you away? What truth do they refuse to tell? Samuel's jaw tightened. For a long while he stared into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, roughened by years of silence. "They say I murdered a man," he began, "and they're not wrong." Clara stiffened, but he held up a hand. "I killed him because he was beating a boy half to death. The sheriff's own nephew. No one else dared step in. When I dragged him off, he came at me with a knife. I broke his neck." His eyes flickered with old pain. "The town hated me before that. I was too big, too wild. They said I belonged to the mountains, not among decent folk. The boy lived, but they buried me instead." Clara's heart ached. She could see it now, the truth behind the legend. Not a monster, but a man punished for being stronger than the law dared to be. "They feared you," she whispered. "So, they chained you." Samuel's gaze met hers across the fire. "And you unchained me." Her breath caught beneath the weight of his stare. The cave seemed smaller, the firelight flickering shadows across the walls, every heartbeat loud. In the silence, "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why risk everything for me?" Clara swallowed hard. "Because I saw a man where they saw a beast. Because I know what it is to be alone, to be unwanted. And because I couldn't stop myself." The admission hung heavy in the air. Samuel's chest rose and fell, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached across the fire and took her hand. His touch was rough, calloused, but careful, as though he held something precious. For the first time in years, Samuel Kane allowed himself to feel the warmth of another's hand. And for the first time in her life, Clara Bennett felt she had found a place she belonged, in the shelter of a man everyone else feared. Outside, the mountains stood silent and eternal, their peaks crowned with new snow. Somewhere below, the town still searched, their voices carried faintly on the wind. But in the cave only the fire spoke, crackling softly between two souls who had been chained in different ways, and who now, together, had begun to break free. 4. 2 nights, Clara and Samuel remained hidden in the cave. The fire kept them warm, and the mountain air, though sharp, seemed cleaner than anything Clara had ever breathed in town. But they both knew peace would not last. On the 3rd morning, Samuel returned from scouting with his jaw tight. "They've found our trail," he said. "The sheriff's men are climbing the ridge. By sundown, they'll be here." Clara's heart pounded. "Then we'll run deeper." Samuel shook his head. "Not with you. These paths are cruel. You're strong, but you're not built for this life. They'll catch you, or worse." Her eyes blazed. "You think I freed you just to lose you again? If you go, I go." His chest heaved, torn between instinct and the strange new bond tying him to her. For a moment, the mountain man who had spent years alone looked almost helpless. By late afternoon, the sound of voices and snapping branches echoed closer. Samuel and Clara stood at the cave's mouth, waiting. He had fashioned a spear from a stripped branch, his stance that of a predator, cornered but unyielding. Clara clutched his coat around her shoulders, refusing to retreat. The sheriff appeared. First lantern high, his deputies behind him. Their guns glinted in the fading light. His voice was grim, cutting through the mountain wind. "Samuel Kane, you've had your taste of freedom. It ends here." Samuel stepped forward, the firelight of the setting sun painting his scarred face. "You want me?" he growled. "Come take me." The deputies raised their rifles, but the sheriff held up a hand. His gaze shifted to Clara. "Miss Bennett, you don't belong here. Step away from him and I'll see you return safe to town. This isn't your fight." Clara's voice was steady, though her knees shook. "It became my fight the moment you locked him away for saving a boy's life." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand what you're protecting." She lifted her chin. "No, you don't." The standoff stretched taut as a drawn bow. Then with a roar, Samuel hurled his makeshift spear at the ground before the sheriff's boots, the wood splintering on the rocks. "Enough words. If you want to drag me back, you'll have to kill me first." The deputies cocked their rifles. Clara cried out, stepping in front of him. "No!" For a breathless moment, time hung still, the mountains holding their breath, the last light of day bleeding into night. Then a familiar voice rose from the ranks of deputies. "Sheriff, don't shoot!" A boy, barely 17, stumbled forward, his face pale, his eyes wide. Clara recognized him at once. The boy Samuel had once saved, the very reason he had. "A bit caged, Dot." He pointed at Samuel, his voice cracking. "He's telling the truth. Years ago he saved me. My uncle was beating me. Samuel pulled him off. If not for him, I'd be dead." Gasps rippled through the men. The sheriff's face turned ashen, fury and shame battling within him. He barked, "Enough! Get back in line!" But the boy stood firm. "You chained an innocent man because you feared him. I won't let you kill him now." Clara's hand found Samuel's, gripping tight. For the first time, Samuel didn't try to pull away. The sheriff's men faltered, lowering their rifles uncertainly. Years of doubt cracked in that instant, truth spilling through like light into a prison cell. Samuel's deep voice carried across the ridge, steady as the mountains themselves. "I never wanted your town. I never wanted your laws. All I ever wanted was to be left alone. But this woman—" He glanced at Clara, his gaze softening. "She gave me back my life. If you take me now, you'll have to bury me. But you'll bury her too, because I won't go without her." The sheriff's jaw clenched. For a long burning silence, no one moved. Then slowly he lowered his lantern. "Let him go," he said hoarsely. The deputies hesitated, confused, but the boy's steady gaze and the sheriff's broken tone left no room for argument. One by one, the rifles lowered. Samuel exhaled slowly, tension loosening from his shoulders. He turned, pulling Clara gently against him. Her cheek pressed to his chest, and for the first time he felt no chains, no bars, only freedom. The posse retreated, their lanterns bobbing away into the night. The sheriff lingered last, his face carved with regret before finally turning his back. When they were gone, silence returned to the mountains. Only the wind whispered through the pines. Clara tilted her face up to Samuel's, tears mingling with her smile. "It's over," she breathed. He looked down at her, his hand cupping her cheek. "No, Clara, it's just beginning." And in the hush of the mountain night, the feared mountain man, the beast who had been caged, lowered his lips to hers, claiming not just a kiss, but a promise. They had defied the town, broken the chains, and chosen each other. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together. Two souls once condemned, now bound by love and free at last.